Hi there. I'm Tom Field. I'm Senior Vice President of Editorial with Information Security Media Group. I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's session. The topic, the challenges of multi-cloud environments. Joining me today are Derek Nash, the Senior Director, Principal Security Advisor with Optiv, and Jeff Sadecki, who is Solutions Architect Alliances, America's Channels with CrowdStrike. Now, before I bring them onto our virtual stage, let me give you some background on our session. Enterprises operating across multiple cloud providers face mounting cybersecurity challenges as complexity grows and visibility decreases. This webinar explores how organizations can address fragmented security postures, streamline governance, and maintain compliance while managing diverse tools, policies, and access controls across cloud ecosystems. Now, a little bit of background on my organization. Information Security Media Group is a global education and intelligence firm. We're based in the U.S. in Princeton, New Jersey, and you may know us by any number of our 38 media properties. These include Bank Info Security, Data Breach Today, and AIToday.io. In all, we serve an audience of over 1.8 million security and technology leaders globally, and we give them a daily diet of news, analysis, research, events, and educational programs just like this one. Just a few notes of housekeeping. If you have any questions for our presenters, you can submit them anytime during this session via the chat window on your screen. I may not get to every question, but in that case, we will get a response back to you via email. Should you encounter any technical issues while viewing today's webinar, take down the email address you see on your screen. If you write to webinars at ismg.io, we have got support staff standing by to help. And a reminder that today's webinar is copyrighted material meant for today's session and individual study purposes only. If you'd like to use any of the information presented today, or if you're looking for customized training materials, please contact us. Delighted to introduce our sponsors today, starting with Optiv. Optiv is the cyber advisory and solutions leader, delivering strategic and technical expertise to nearly 6,000 companies across every major industry. They partner with organizations to advise, deploy, and operate complete cybersecurity programs, from strategy and managed security services to risk, integration, and technology solutions. With clients at the center of their unmatched ecosystem of people, products, partners, and programs, they accelerate business progress like no other company can. At Optiv, they manage cyber risk so you can secure your full potential. You can learn more at optiv.com. And welcome CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike, a global cybersecurity leader, has redefined modern security with the world's most advanced cloud-native platform for protecting critical areas of enterprise risk, endpoints and cloud workloads, identity, and data. Powered by the CrowdStrike Security Cloud and world-class AI, the CrowdStrike Falcon platform leverages real-time indicators of attack, threat intelligence, evolving adversary tradecraft, and enriched telemetry from across the enterprise to deliver hyper-accurate detections, automated protection and remediation, elite threat hunting, and prioritized observability of vulnerabilities. And of course, you can learn more at crowdstrike.com. Quickly, let's meet our speakers. Derek Nash is a cybersecurity professional. He's got 20 plus years of experience, having served many roles from firewall engineer, pen test team lead, risk consultant, threat intelligence analyst, and now principal security advisor for the Optiv's practice. He is joining us here. He assists clients in defining their cloud-related challenges and applying Optiv services to help solve their problems. Jeff Sadecki has got 25 years of expertise in business and technical analysis for Fortune 500 companies, providing appropriate security solutions that are comprehensive, cost-effective, and integrated. He's currently Solutions Architect, Alliances, America's Channels with CrowdStrike. With that, let's bring on screen here Derek and Jeff. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of this session today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, let's start here. If you were to summarize, what would you say are the top challenges facing enterprises operating across multi-cloud environments?
Derek, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So there's a lot of different challenges that organizations face when dealing with multi-cloud environments. There is obviously a large amount of knowledge that needs to be managed, and I would argue it's basically X amount of knowledge, where X being the number of cloud service providers you have, whether that's 2, 3, 4, maybe even more if you start counting software as a service providers. So you have operational complexity that comes along with that, increased knowledge management requirements, additional administrative overhead, and you end up with a fragmented security environment. The challenge really lies in how you can effectively manage such a diverse array of environments and security policies associated with those environments. Uh, Access control being a primary one that people struggle with when you start talking about multi-cloud environments.
And from CrowdStrike's perspective, I think it's even a broader understanding of the threat landscape and the adversaries. So it's a continuous process of educating customers of the awareness of the threat adversaries and their evolving TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. It's a tradecraft, right, to breach cloud environments. From CrowdStrike's research and threat reports, which we publish on a quarterly and annual basis, cloud breaches can occur in less than an hour, sometimes in just a few minutes. Adversaries are often now just logging in with stolen credentials. So the built-in cloud tools aren't adept enough to thwart this. Another challenge is the sheer scope of individually managing, protecting multi-cloud environments. Customers may use a combination of tools and various third-party tools for multi-cloud services like CSPM, but those too are often just for a subset of the required defense in depth approach to multi-cloud security. And customers have to then become the systems integrator to make it all work. From the items Derek mentioned above, example, fragmented architecture, from a CrowdStrike's value proposition, it's educating, demonstrating to customers, and proving our technical and business value of what we provide as an integrated cybersecurity platform approach to address these challenges.
Joe, I wonder if we might discuss some specific challenges. Now you've got some case studies to share as well. Let's start here. Talk to me about fragmented visibility and management.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we start to deal with multi-cloud environments, most clients start off with a single cloud service provider, and they generally tend to adopt native cloud tools from that provider. The problem becomes when you start adding multiple cloud service providers, you end up with siloed monitoring. Everyone has their own tool set, their own view. You're now creating additional pivots in the chair, as we like to call it, between cloud service provider solutions around monitoring. And it's very hard to get a cohesive view on what's going on across all clouds. And multi-cloud attacks are as common as multi-cloud environments are today. So that's one thing, siloed monitoring. We also talked about using the native tools of those clients when we start talking about unique interfaces, APIs, security controls, how those controls are constructed within each service provider. They vary, they're different. You'll have things that oftentimes sound the same, but may actually have very different functionality based on the cloud service provider. So you end up with this tools proliferation. And with that, obviously, comes increased administrative overhead and knowledge management requirements. You're going to hear a lot about that. Part of this is just the fact that you're increasing the environments that you have to manage, thus the attack surface and all of the administrative administration that goes along with that. And then last but not least, shadow IT is still alive and well, even as clients are more formalizing their cloud programs. And so it's very easy for new services to come online. And even if it is within an established cloud service provider, part of the agility that clients are after is the ability to quickly and easily spin up new services. So having visibility into what is being used on a per cloud service provider basis is also a big challenge for our clients. Yeah, and as it comes to fragmented visibility and management, we have to think about how it affects not only technology, but people, which I kind of equate to skills, as well as processes. And part of this is obviously implementing structured and continuous learning for our staff members. Um, there's a lot to learn here for security teams. There's a whole new ecosystem. How they interact with that ecosystem is very important, and changing of their mentality is equally as important. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We also need to provide them hands-on experience in these cloud environments. It's not just enough to send them to training. They need to have a sandbox to begin to learn and exercise those skills. We need to foster cross-functional collaboration across IT, security, and dev to make sure that we're prepared to respond. And we want to offer opportunities to our staff for professional certification and advancement. I love the old story about a CEO saying, talking to the CFO, saying we need to train our people. And the CFO says, well, what if we invest all this money in training and they leave? And the CEO answer is, what if we don't invest in this training? What are we going to be left with? So that's important as well. We also want to provide and make sure that we establish unified and consistent governance policies that stretch all cloud service providers. We want to automate security and compliance as much as we can. In fact, I would argue that is the main value driver of cloud. Everything becomes software, and everything should be managed via software, whether it's infrastructure as code, policy as code. All those things need to migrate to an as code mentality, and thus we can automate them via CI/CD pipelines and DevSecOps life cycles. We want to adopt centralized identity and access management. We do not want that to be fragmented, and we want to have a consistent view across that. And last but not least, we have to develop and test cloud incident response plans that take into account multi-cloud. And that's not only from a technology perspective, but we're going to have different constituencies that we work with across each cloud service provider. There's probably going to be a dev team tied to each one, and there's going to be potentially IT teams tied to each one of those. And so we're talking now about X amount of uptick in complexity just managing all of the people and the interactions.
So from CrowdStrike's perspective on the next slide, for the consolidated visibility and management, it's really the ability to take advantage of the CrowdStrike platform, right? Especially for existing CrowdStrike customers that may be endpoint customers. It's just another option on the menu interface for them to go into. So it provides a pervasive set of technology within the platform to address the visibility and management in a multi-cloud environment. As a for instance, I won't get into all the details, right? But it's a really very relatively simple licensing structure, right? And it's all about the tools for what we refer to as proactive cloud security. So that provides CSPM, identity, infrastructure scanning, among other things. So this is the first step in enabling setting up, right? As everyone is very well aware of what the CSPM functionality does and in the broad scope of a cloud environment. But specifically, when you take ours and you integrate it, you register it, right? So we have an agentless connection, an API connection. And so now you have the ability to hook into all your public cloud environments. But we always suggest you hook into every single region available there, every single account work, or, all the identity structure, because if you don't have that complete visibility, you may have gaps in regards to, services that are being deployed in particular different regions that you may not expect. So it really provides that platform approach. So you have an integrated set of tools and features for that comprehensive visibility, asset configuration checks, often referred to as indicators of misconfiguration, the policies we have to check the numerous asset classes that every public cloud environment has. Assessing that on a regular basis. And then with that, then you can now think of the platform approach as CrowdStrike as kind of the overlay of the cybersecurity platform on top of the services already available there in the multi-cloud environment, but it raises up, it provides that high-level tiered, right, integration into all the cloud environments, providing that pervasive visibility which is out there. And then certainly if you're talking about, it's like, well, individually, each public cloud administrator, right, has their myopic view in their own particular cloud environment. And now we're saying, let's provide an overlay service. Then you have to go back and integrate the capability, like with cloud groups and role-based access and so on and so forth. So each, constituent or groups can have access to the particular information relevant to their cloud environment coming from the platform approach. And it really does help reduce the shadow IT because you're centralizing all the capabilities within our platform approach. And you're going to hear this more than once when I talk about the CrowdStrike platform approach, for the fact that almost all the modules, right, are interconnected, right? One of them related to cloud is identity protection. So that, in effect, is one of the biggest attack surfaces is related to identity. So now if you hook in our existing identity protection with the IAM services within the cloud environment, IAM specific to AWS, but generally for all the cloud environments, you now have additional tools to not only check what is the appropriate settings within the identity structures within the cloud, but also monitor behavior for users that are logging into the cloud so you can detect anomalies. So we not only provide superior multi-cloud services, but what's much better in the customer's process efficiency, right? You don't have multiple screens to go to. You have a centralized platform. And one final plug in regards to the platform approach. Obviously, most customers have a SIM, right? So CrowdStrike has a next generation SIM, and all the data from the multi-cloud environment is considered first-party data, so it's immediately available for detection triage and for advanced searches.
CrowdStrike presents Falcon Cloud Security Assets Explorer. To understand the overall attack surface, cloud security engineers want to understand asset sprawl, cloud usage, and types of cloud services in use. Falcon Cloud Security provides a visual, hierarchical interface for navigating, grouping, and assessing risk across your entire cloud estate. Organizations can use Assets Explorer for logical drill down to navigate by compute, network, identity, and other core cloud resource categories. Customizable grouping to visualize assets across multiple clouds with filters by account ID, region, and asset category. Persistent views to maintain context with saved filters and navigation history. Additionally, Charlotte AI, which empowers teams to surface security insights through natural language, is embedded directly in Asset Explorer. Charlotte AI's generative capabilities quickly surface information across the cloud environments. For example, you can search for a list of all the compute resources with critical security misconfigurations. By surfacing comprehensive security insights directly within each asset, Falcon Cloud Security eliminates the traditional challenge of correlating security data across multiple tools and dashboards. FCS pulls data sensitivity, identity context, internet exposure, and vulnerability assessment into a single unified view. Contact us to explore all your assets in the cloud with Falcon Cloud Security.
Jim, let's talk a little bit about inconsistent policies and misconfigurations, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So inconsistent policies and misconfigurations is one of the significant challenges that people deal with in a multi-cloud environment. Tools like CrowdStrike really help with this, and I'll talk about some of the challenges, and then Jeff can kind of talk to us about how CrowdStrike addresses these things. One is differing security models. Each cloud provider has a shared responsibility model. Depending on the service being consumed, that shared service model or shared responsibility model can be implemented very differently. And attempting to manually apply consistent policies across these varied platforms is really prone to human error and misconfiguration. It's just also can be very complex to try to get consistency across all of those cloud service providers. The other piece of this is how do you manage configuration drift? Part of the issue here is really the dynamic nature of cloud environments, which means security configurations can change and change frequently. That might not even be happening by the organization's kind of ongoing operations, but can actually happen from the cloud security service or cloud service provider itself. They are constantly bringing up new services, changing roles and entitlements with those roles. So you can end up with this configuration and security drift over time. Essentially allowing people to maybe do more or give them more rights and entitlements than expected. And those can then be used to create security gaps, which could be exploited in the future. We talked about excessive permissions a little bit, but the fact that that's going to grow across multiple distinct platforms. You can look at individual cloud service providers, and many of them have multiple ways to manage identity and access management. So now multiply that times X number of cloud service providers, it becomes extremely complex, extremely quickly. And as I talked about over time, roles gain entitlements over time generally. And so you have entitlement creep going on as well. Um, this also gets exacerbated when we start talking about all the automation that we're going to want to consume and leverage in these environments. We're now talking about machines authenticating other machines. You're not going to stop and manually provision services. You've got to figure out a way to how to automate that. And so that's another area that becomes more difficult when you start talking multi-cloud service providers. These overprivileged accounts offer a lot of significant security risks for organizations. So really what we need to do is we really need to implement cross-platform security sandboxes to train our people on. We need to mandate role-based multi-cloud certifications for our staff members. We need to establish game day as well as capture the flag and incident response tabletops. And we really need to foster a security champion culture within DevSecOps. Security cannot only be the security team going forward. IT ops as well as development all play a part in that, and we need to foster champions in all of those groups, as well as really dramatically change security's approach in that area. That really comes back to the idea that we need to, I hate to use this term because I think it's overused, but shift left, but I haven't heard a better way of describing that. Security really needs to transform from being reactionary gatekeepers to proactive partners for IT and development, and really need to focus away from building gates to building guidelines and guardrails that people can build secure by default infrastructure and applications. We need to establish better governance processes around IAM, mandate the use of centralized CSPM and cloud infrastructure entitlement tools as well. And I know that CrowdStrike can talk to those, and formalize kind of break glass procedures for just-in-time access. In fact, we talk a lot about wanting to use multi-factor authentication and things of that nature to secure privileged accounts in cloud environments. There's a flip side to that coin. There's the other side. You do not want to essentially lock yourself out should you have problems with multi-factor authentication. So you need to essentially establish break glass type of accounts that are heavily monitored. And if those are ever used and leveraged, that should be a very serious event for an organization, but it allows them essentially an account of last resort should they get locked out of their cloud environment. Jeff, tell us a little bit about what CrowdStrike can do in this area.
Certainly. Well, as you can tell from the pattern, right, you're introducing the problem statement in a more generic, and I'm honing in on a specific set of features that CrowdStrike could provide to deal with the problem statement. So first and foremost, policies are critically important, and they cover many areas. For instance, right, individual checks within a public cloud environment may be there. But obviously, once again, if you're raising and providing an overlay like the Falcon platform for cloud security, it's the overlay of the size of, from a cybersecurity perspective, especially when it comes to policies and checks and helping to ultimately stop, a cloud breach. So more tactically, if we talk about consistent security policies, there's two key functions, right, within, we call it proactive cloud security. And that's really kind of considering the day-to-day, like the shift left or the ongoing checks for indicators of misconfigurations. So we have infrastructure as code scanning policies to check cloud asset configurations before deployment, right? That's the shift left. The more you can fix the possible misconfigurations of assets before they get deployed, the less indicators of misconfiguration you'll have for those assets because you've already done due diligence, right? You've done the homework with the infrastructure as code scanning. And there's also the within our CSPM product, we have indicators of misconfiguration. So once again, you do the registration, you have visibility into all the cloud assets that the customer may have services in. And then we have the regular cadence of approximately every 2 hours, checking the indicators of misconfiguration. But a very, very powerful differentiated feature we have is also our IOA policies, indicators of attack. These are behavioral policies. So with that, we're tying in now 2 conversation points. When you have the ability to register into cloud accounts, you have the ability to connect in and retrieve at a very high level. Let's just call it the real-time logs from the public cloud environment. So from that, in near real time, receiving the log information, and we can see change behavior from that log and then assess it against our behavior policies for indicators of attack. The second great benefit of having the log information is now we're able to track the asset change history. So once we register into a particular cloud environment, we're learning about the assets, and then we're dynamically getting changes to the assets. So then we have within our Cloud Asset Explorer an entire asset history, which is available, right? So if by chance there's an issue with a particular asset, you can look at the diff, right? The difference of what happened between the prior configuration state to the current configuration state. And I always talk about the trio of what are probably the most important critical assets in a cloud environment. It's certainly identity, number one, and then storage assets, and then workload assets. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have several. In fact, for the identity services in all cloud environments, we have the most number of policies to check for indicators of misconfiguration, and also behavioral policies for that. And then tying into what we also have is CrowdStrike identity protection, you have knowledge of the identity behaviors. So you're actually seeing, it's like, why does this particular user who normally logs in from, a specific IP address or location is now all of a sudden logging in from someplace else? This is anomaly behavior that we've learned from the behavior of that particular identity. And once again, from the platform approach, you have Next-Gen SIEM for the integration of the features and functionality. So on the right-hand side, this is more the tactical steps, just a few of them in regards to, having that ability within your cloud environments to use the real-time visibility detection, because that gets you the behavioral information, gets you the asset history information using the identity protection module. The Cloud Asset Explorer is the most powerful individual component, I believe, within our cloud security capabilities, because what have we started with? Visibility. And that is the entirety of everything that's been ingested. And then a numerous, I call them pivot points or selections, to find individual components of an asset for it. And then from a process perspective is, coming up with specific filters, right? What if you want to specifically find a set of asset classes and a particular characteristics about them? You can quickly develop those in that. I'd also like to expand upon the fact of where CrowdStrike is headed from a cloud detection and response. Now, that term can be used in a variety of different ways, but the scenario I want to bring up is, if you think about the two critical cloud security components from CrowdStrike, we have our endpoint sensor technology to detect and prevent nefarious behaviors and workloads. We also have numerous checks run on a frequent cycle to check for indicators of misconfiguration, as I've said before, but there's no sensor to detect cloud control plane issues, right? It's like we can monitor for them, but how can you dynamically inject some sort of, stop signal, for lack of better terms, for that? So this is a shameless plug, but just yesterday, CrowdStrike the results came out from an evaluation that we had done with the MITRE ATT&CK enterprise evaluation. And we had 100% efficiency in regards to detection and prevention and zero false positives. And this is coming about because CrowdStrike is now developing a robust set of intelligent behavior policies to act as that cloud detection response for the control plane. So we're receiving, once again, that key telemetry from the cloud services, AWS Event Bridge, interpreting the findings in the behavior policies, and using SOAR workflows to control the cloud control plane actions. An example of an extended behavior policy is EC2 mass deletion anomaly detection, right? So it could be indicative of a suspicious pattern of EC2 instances. Deletions were detected. This may indicate an attacker attempting to destroy infrastructure, a malicious insider, or misconfigured automation tool. The detection compares deletion activity against the user's historical baseline to identify abnormal behaviors. So the first phase of IOA was really about the individual discrete functions, but now we're tracking users and behavior over time to detect anomalous behaviors for that. And if you go to the next slide, this really is an example of when we look at it is an example from if you go to our interface and look at the individual policies, right? There's the three primary phases that I've talked about, right? So, and this is an example of the commonality that we have for the shift left or the pre-deployment of the assets out there, doing that with the infrastructure as code scanning, which we do have a tool for that. So as an example here, we're checking the S3 bucket, which may have an allow public policy. And this is where, just as a reminder or for knowledge, right, the IAC scanning is an ad hoc tool that, code developers, cloud code developers deploying infrastructure would run on a periodic basis. And then once we do the registration process into the cloud assets, we have the regular periodic checks for the indicators of misconfiguration. So you can see one, we have identical, right? Policy for S3 bucket configured for public access. So here we can check if that was missed in the IAC scanning phase. And then the final for the win is we have an IOA behavioral policy. So if we dynamically see that something is happening in real time, we can alert you to that, for instance, an S3 bucket was made public through policy in a dynamic fashion, so you can interpret it and take some action for that.
I want to go on here and hear some more, Derek. Maybe you can start the conversation about the increased attack surface and threat protection. What can you share?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, just through consuming multiple cloud service providers, it's only natural that our attack surface expands. But let's dig into that a little bit more. We'd have to think about the fact that we have different interfaces, whether those are GUI-based interfaces, APIs, or the actual access points within those APIs that can be exploited, potentially if not properly secured. This really expands the overall attack surface and increases the risk of threat propagating laterally across connected clouds. So land one place, get a foothold, and potentially jump to another cloud service provider or another cloud service. Because we talk about having people using, native utilities within each cloud service provider, and you're trying to fragment that fragmented visibility together and disjointed monitoring together, we're talking about a slowing down and delayed threat detection as an output of leveraging purely and only native tools. That's why we love our partners like CrowdStrike and other vendors within the CNAPP space to really help us quickly get a cross-cloud view of what is going on at a given point in time. Also, logging is done differently in each one, and just the sheer volume of alerts that can come from multiple sources can make it really hard to spot anomalies quickly. Trying to find the needles within the needles that are actually relevant to your organization. Our partners can really help do that and help deliver on that. And then just the complexity of incident response. How are you going to track an activity that started, let's say, in AWS and then was used as a launch point to actually get to a resource or an asset in Microsoft Azure or GCP? How are you going to actually follow that attack chain from one cloud service provider to another if all you have in your arsenal are the native cloud tools that are really relegated only to that specific cloud service provider? It becomes very complex and very difficult and a lot of manual processes in order to do that. And you need to be able to respond quickly and effectively. Remember in the beginning, Jeff said, sometimes they see attacks occur over a matter of minutes. When I was working for another company, we commonly saw that as well. Highly targeted attacks that were very effective and literally would execute in minutes. And so time is of the essence. So what people need to do to really help move their organizations forward and their security programs forward is, you're going to hear a lot of repetition here, but implement a cross-cloud platform training for security engineers to achieve some basic foundational certifications. I don't like the term certifications. Let's just say skills. They need to be familiar with what it is they're trying to secure. That's a huge uplift for a lot of security teams. They don't have a lot of experience there. The realities are it's probably very difficult to, even with the current environment, to go out and hire that readily. You're going to have to build it. You're going to have to establish unified tooling across cloud service providers. CrowdStrike Falcon Cloud is a prime example of that. We're going to talk more about that. Conduct regular integrated tabletop exercises. This is extremely important. You do not want to wait till you're in the middle of the fog of war dealing with an incident to actually understand what your processes are, what they need to be, where you're proficient, and where you maybe have areas of enhancement that you need to consider. And then we need to exercise we need to foster kind of DevSecOps collaboration. Security can't respond uh, in and of themselves. We need to be able to pull in developers and IT ops folks to understand what is going on. They'll have much more intimate knowledge of what normal looks like in the various applications and IT infrastructure. So leveraging them and building out a true incident response team is very important, and even more important when we're talking multi-cloud. We want to establish a centralized governance board that's really going to help us manage attack surface and manage the risk associated with that attack surface. We're going to want to implement security as code with standardized templates, unified via infrastructure as code templates, to make sure that we are building infrastructure that is secure by default. Some of the tools available from CrowdStrike can help you ensure that infrastructure as code has the components it needs in it to ensure that things are being built securely. And we want to mandate a unified incident response playbook. That playbook needs to account for all cloud service providers as well as software as a service providers, so that we have playbooks for each one of those unique circumstances, and ones that account for the differentiation between cloud service providers. And then we want to be able to formalize continuous automated posture management. And a tool like CrowdStrike's Falcon is one of the only ways that you can really do that. Talk a little bit about the tactical and details involved with CrowdStrike's solution.
Just exactly where I was headed. Jeff, stage is yours.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I think this is at a good point. I'm really going to hone in on the fact of, everything we've talked about so far, visibility, policies, and so on and so forth, is very critical, right? And CrowdStrike is obviously not the only vendor that can do that, but we feel that we do it in a better way. I mentioned one previously in regards to the behavioral attacks, indicators of attack, and the content detection response, which is just being released. And once again, with that particular award. But now with this, it's not only viewing the attack surface, but the broader capability of what I am collectively pooling in with this when I talk about managed threat detection. That could be interpreted as having the power of our sensor within the cloud environments. So certainly from the viewing of the attack surface is there's the myopic view, the myopic checks, right? Individual checks of particular assets and the misalignment of possible configurations for those assets. But it's the broader term and seeing from the entry point of the big I internet into the individual asset, right? It's passing through several services in the cloud environment. Each of them may have different configuration aspects, which may make the particular breach more susceptible, right? Upstream, there may be no particular, for instance, at a VPC layer for any access control list, there may be nothing, right? So then all internet traffic is coming in. And so you want to make sure you have as many checks along the attack surface path as is applicable to really make sure it's the most secure communication as possible, especially if you're talking to a storage device or a workload device and so on. So that's really from the attack surface path, right? It's how an adversary can traverse the services of the cloud. But once again, you may be blind to other more critical unresolved issues for that. And our attack path analysis has these key combinations and gives you the suggested resolution for each individual component for that. So you have the visibility and the tactical steps of what to do that. Now, the threat protection, or the threat detection being the sensor from our endpoint, our sensors. This is the huge, completely different value differentiation that CrowdStrike offers, and it's a huge value proposition for existing CrowdStrike customers. So you now have a common tool, right? The sensor for all workloads in any cloud environment with the same set of detection and prevention profiles. And so this is a big significant advantage. Generically, I'll talk about a big customer win I had a year or two ago when I was a cloud sales engineer. And it was a huge Azure shop, right? They were heavily leveraged in Azure. And the particular subject matter expert, one of the key decision makers, was adamant that the Azure Defender software was good enough. And I brought up the fact, it's like, well, the 12,000 other endpoints you have in your particular environment are all CrowdStrike. Why wouldn't you standardize on the same aspect of what that sensor technology can do in the cloud? Just because it was by default installed doesn't necessarily make it's the best sensor technology for that. So we ended up winning the business. No, not trying to disparage Azure, but it was from our perspective, it was a value proposition because the customer was so heavily leveraged already with the CrowdStrike sensor for that. So while it is not another thing, CrowdStrike is as a differentiation in the marketplace is our cloud detection response or a managed detection response service, right? As a complete managed detection. So this is especially beneficial for an organization's SOC team is the primary triage and support organization for the day-to-day management of multi-cloud threat detection. But if you have staff shortages or you need to offload, the first line threat analysis, CrowdStrike offers options for a complete overwatch. And for the really, hope it never happens in your environment, you do get breached. We also have our incident response retainers that could be called in, and it works in any breach scenario, including cloud. So a little bit on the right, the technologies and tools, it's really that pervasive coverage of the sensor technology. And certainly when we talk about how different workloads can be deployed, especially in a Kubernetes environment, we have Helm charts or an operator deployed as a daemon set, as an example. And it's really the processes of either Optiv or CrowdStrike can provide proactive services ahead of time, right? A health check, if you will, for are the settings in my cloud environment secure as possible? So to do a compromise assessment services proactively with either CrowdStrike or Optiv in that particular environment.
CrowdStrike presents Attack Path Analysis. The Attack Path dashboard enables you to address the highest risk attack paths and the most prevalent associated risks. When you click on a widget, you're taken to the Attack Paths table. The Attack Paths table enables you to identify and remediate risks an adversary can leverage to obtain access to a critical asset. You are able to visualize attack paths, making it easier to understand the connections between assets. This cloud attack path displays the potential route attackers can take to compromise on-prem and cloud workloads. Adversaries can take advantage of overly permissive network control lists and security groups to move deeper into your environment and achieve their objectives. The right panel displays an expanded description and the remediation steps for the path. Using DSPM classification tags or labels, CrowdStrike can identify and prioritize attack paths that lead to sensitive data. On a separate attack path, you can see the connections between on-prem and cloud assets. Next, you select the table view to explore various predictors of attack gleaned from platform telemetry, including vulnerabilities and misconfigurations identified and prioritized by Falcon Exposure Management, as well as cloud indicators of misconfigurations and indicators of attack on the particular asset. By selecting the asset graph, low-effort and high-impact remediation recommendations are shown, enabling targeted actions to break critical attack paths before they can be exploited. During an emergency response, take quick targeted actions by network-containing choke points along the attack path to prevent further lateral movement. Contact us to leverage attack path analysis for proactive security and exposure management.
We'll move on now and talk about one of the other issues, which is data protection challenges. Derek, kick us off, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite statistics that I've heard in recent years is that 90% of all data created in the world has been created in the last year. So we have this issue of data sprawl. Artificial intelligence is just increasing that. We are consuming data in mass. We are also generating, because of cloud and Internet of Things, we are creating massive amounts of data. So we have data sprawl, and we also have a lot more opportunities for exfiltration. If we just look at various cloud service providers, we'll look at maybe one that a lot of people don't think about necessarily as a traditional cloud service provider, but let's talk about Microsoft 365 as an example. If we think about all of the work that Microsoft has done over the past couple of decades to make their key products, their cornerstone products, more secure by default, now we introduce things like cloud services, Microsoft 365. I would argue that we kind of stepped back in time about 10 years. And what I mean by that is that Microsoft M365, as an example, is all about collaboration and democratization of data and data sharing. That increases the chance of exfiltration. And you can apply the same type of thing, same type of lens to AWS, Azure, and GCP. Sensitive data is distributed across multiple cloud service providers, becomes harder to track and enforce consistent data protection policies, whether data at rest or data in motion. And this increases the risk of data leaks and exfiltration, especially when data is transferred between different clouds. Disparate encryption standards. Huge. It's how you, and I would even go a step further, how do you manage keys across multiple cloud service providers? Each one has its own key management service. You can leverage certain cloud service providers now claim to have key management that can be leveraged by other cloud service providers, but you also have third parties in this space that are kind of abstracted away from any particular cloud service provider that can help you manage secrets and keys. So these standards vary, and managing these keys across different platforms is extremely complex. It's complex to try to do it in one environment, let alone manage it in three, and still have an enterprise view of all of your keying material and all of your encryption. And let's not forget that encryption is a double-edged sword. It obviously can protect our data, but if we're not managing keys appropriately, it can also potentially render our data unreadable, which is another form of operational risk to our organizations, and we don't want to forget that either. And then we have difficulties in life cycle management. How do you manage the life cycle of data when it is created, when it is used, when it is in sunset, and how it gets securely destroyed? You now have to do that X amount of times in X amount of cloud service providers. So we want to make sure that we build that into our ecosystem on how we manage across cloud service providers. This really means emphasizing security as code. Again, you're going to hear us harp on infrastructure as code and security as code. So things like Terraform and Ansible can help establish some of these practices. We want to establish a data guardian type of culture with roles created as security champions specifically around data that are embedded in our IT teams and our development teams. We want to conduct multi-cloud incident response drills. And then from a processes perspective, we want to establish a centralized data governance board. This is probably separate from your overall cloud governance board, but someone that is a group of people that is really focused on how you're managing data within these environments. And again, one of the biggest things that we can do to help secure this is security by design checkpoints within our SDLC, where we're actually checking data and to ensure that data is encrypted, data is properly permissioned, so on and so forth. We can do those via unit tests. We can also do those within various cloud security solutions, and I know that we can talk about that with CrowdStrike. And then automated continuous discovery and classification. We can't secure what we don't know about. We can't manage it if we don't know about it. So we need to be constantly discovering what types of data are living in our cloud solutions, whether structured or unstructured, and making sure we're classifying it and applying the correct controls.
That sounds like a segue to talk to Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. So for the data protection solutions from CrowdStrike, let me go back and reiterate. It's implied when we talked about this before, but for cloud services like S3, right, anything related to data storage, we already have numerous policies to check for the best, most secure configurations for that, indicators of best configuration. And as I alluded to before, that's considering once again my trio of the most important identity, storage, and cloud workloads. We have indicators of attack behavior policies for the changes that may be happening for the data storage. So that's the foundational, right? That's obviously why we started with that. So now moving into more of the business value, if you will, for what CrowdStrike provides. Actually, CrowdStrike has 3 different data protection services. The first one has been around for a while, and that is for the endpoints, right? Basically, workstation servers with the Windows sensor. There's various policies can be established for that. That's just kind of a related, obviously, to the conversation we're having here. So that's been available for a while. And then we've had DSPM functionality. So once again, when you register into the cloud environments, that's an option. Do you want me to have the ability to assess your storage services for data at rest? And that is, the primary function of, one of the primary functions for DSPM. The second one actually just came out in the last couple of weeks, and you'll see an upcoming video which describes it very well. And that is the DSPM functionality for data in motion. So how can we do that? Well, a little bit of history. It was 18 months ago. CrowdStrike acquired a small company called Flow. Flow was developing a Linux eBPF sensor for the development to monitor data in motion. So we took that intellectual property, integrated it into the Linux sensor. So that's now become available. So think about, right? If you think about the sensor technology, you have a variety of profiles for detection and prevention. Now you can apply them for data, which is what we're doing in a cloud environment within Linux sensor. So the core details, if you will, for identifying sensitive data, right? We're doing for when we're scanning data at rest, we're looking for the tags, like is it a geo-related tag? Is it PII related? And then the labels, right? So for geo, be related to a state, or if it's PII, what would be your email? And then the data protection from cloud data protection services is identifying and protecting risky transmissions and unintended exposure of data, and analyzing, because the sensor has such a low level of visibility at the IP flow and the data, right? We're able to identify the source and destination and sensitive payloads by monitoring the flows across APIs, third-party applications, cloud storage, and databases. So really, it's the full suite of our suggestion is utilizing the full suite of the CrowdStrike technology, especially when it comes to the proactive, when you do the CSPM registration, also have the hooks and integration for DSPM. And then obviously, just as I had said before, although I don't think I mentioned it, when you're doing that registration, make it as broad and wide as possible. I do have a relevant experience working with a customer a couple of years ago. It's like, we don't want your registration to go into all the European regions, Asian regions, and so on and so forth. We don't have services. And I told them a story about a customer that said the same thing, but we did the registration. They happened to have a contractor that was in the European region, and by default, they created services in that, right? So unless we had turned it on, they wouldn't have been aware of additional services that were in multi-region capabilities. So the same comes with data. Wherever your data is at, make sure you're connected in for the pervasive coverage of being able to look at it. So yeah, I think that's a wrap. We continue to grow in all the features and functionality. In general, as you can imagine, anytime you talk about data, it's a huge, complex topic, right? Do you mean DLP? Do you mean EDM, Enterprise Document Management, so on and so forth? So for the purposes of what Derek and I talk about, it's around the tools, processing services in a multi-cloud environment.
CrowdStrike, Falcon Data Protection for Cloud. In a cloud-first world, data moves continuously across applications, services, storage systems, and third-party platforms. Without full visibility into how data is stored and transmitted, security gaps are inevitable. Falcon Data Protection for Cloud extends DSPM into runtime, delivering real-time visibility and protection for sensitive data in motion and at rest. Locations of sensitive data and their flow are surfaced across object storage, databases, SaaS platforms, and internal services. And data types such as PCI, PII, and other regulated categories are automatically classified with real-time detections for unauthorized access or risky movement. We've always said organizations don't have a malware problem, they have an adversary problem. Scattered Spider is a highly sophisticated e-crime adversary known to target cloud environments and exfiltrate data as part of their attack chain. Attackers like Scattered Spider use compromised accounts and legitimate tools to sync sensitive business data to attacker-controlled infrastructure, bypassing traditional detection methods. Falcon Data Protection for Cloud exposes malicious egress from internal and external threats. When an attacker tries to exfiltrate sensitive information, such as AWS keys, to an attacker-controlled asset exposed to the internet, it instantly triggers a detection, with full context including what data was involved, where it came from, and where it was sent. By analyzing data in motion, Falcon Data Protection for Cloud provides real-time insight into how sensitive information moves across the environment. The Data Flow View visualizes this activity, showing the source, destination, and data classifications involved. Filters can be applied to focus the investigation, helping teams quickly identify what's at risk. Then, select the asset to get actionable context to investigate and respond quickly. It reveals the data involved and any matched classifications for sensitive data, such as personally identifiable information, to prioritize the investigation. The origin of the data is clearly shown, along with any other flows associated with the selected asset. Security teams can then investigate related connections and drill into the data involved in transmission events. From there, it's easy to pivot into Falcon Next-Gen SIM, pre-filtered to the data transmission event to accelerate the search and take action. Falcon Data Protection for Cloud also secures data at rest for comprehensive visibility. Customize the scan frequency and targeted accounts to support operational needs and security goals. Falcon Data Protection for Cloud delivers visibility into critical cloud data flows, insight into how sensitive data interacts with applications and services, and detection capabilities to identify when data is exposed or unintentionally leaving the environment, providing the context needed to stop breaches before they occur. Contact us to learn how to get instant visibility to secure your cloud data flows.
A couple more topics we want to hit here. Let's start here first. Vulnerability management complexities. Derek, you've got some excellent insight to share here.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked a lot about visibility, and we're going to talk about it again because it's important. Assets are really spread across different platforms, whether it be AWS, Azure, GCP, Alibaba. We could go on and on. Each of those combine their own monitoring tools and dashboards, and that results in fragmentation and blind spots around just the vulnerabilities you have. And we could even talk about what vulnerabilities mean. Those could be missing patches. Those could be actual misconfigurations. Those could be under-configured services, services that haven't been configured from a security perspective. If we think about things like CIS benchmarks, are we running a secure service, or are we running an inherently insecure service? So all of that becomes much more difficult when you start talking multi-cloud service providers. And also when you start talking about ephemeral, short-lived workloads such as containers and serverless functions that are here 1 minute and gone the next. How do you gain visibility into those? That's a real challenge for a lot of organizations that are not necessarily prepared to take those things on. Inconsistent security policies and configurations, as each cloud provider has a unique set of tools. Really, it's challenging to enforce a standard set of policies and vulnerability management practices across those. This oftentimes leads to misconfigurations or unknown vulnerabilities to the organization, because not all tools are equal. Complex identity and access management, managing users and non-human identities, which are probably even a bigger issue in the cloud environment, such as service accounts, API access, across multiple distinct IAM systems is a complex process and can lead to overprivileged accounts, unused credentials, and general access control flaws. It is highly complex. We can pick on AWS. They have a couple of different engines that you can use for managing identity. And so it's important to understand the differences in those, and then compare them to Azure or GCP, and they're very much different again and again. So we want to make sure that we foster cross-functional collaboration, that we actually have hands-on experience in these various cloud service providers, that we're training not only our security staff, but our IT and dev staff on how to properly use secrets and permissions in these environments, and that we have security practitioners that have really started to change their mindset from gatekeeping to providing proactive engagement and code patterns that are secure by default. We need to integrate security into that development lifecycle to avoid vulnerabilities. In fact, I would argue if we do infrastructure as code, we could probably eliminate 90, even maybe as high as 95% of the vulnerabilities that we encounter. I'll give you a very practical example. If we are building images, part of our image build process should be that patches are all applied, that we are using scripts to apply benchmarks to those various services so we know that they are secure by default. And those are available both in the development environment, the QA environment, and the production environment, so that we have consistency, so that we don't have applications being broke at the 11th hour before they ship, because now all of a sudden we want to apply all of our security best practices. Those should be there from the beginning, and then developers and IT operations are working through the issues that they may present, and we can have intelligent discussions as well. That also means layering in things such as threat intelligence, and threat intelligence specifically around vulnerabilities, and being able to actually tell richer, better stories around vulnerabilities and why it's necessary to address them. That is the constant struggle between IT development and security, is the difference in managing operational risk versus security risk. And if we can up-level that conversation, provide real-world examples, that greatly improves things as well. And then we want to make sure that we've automated as much of the vulnerability lifecycle as possible, so that we can do better asset discovery. We continuously do vulnerability scanning. If we're starting to adopt ephemeral workloads, every time a new workload is substantiated, it should be based off the most recent image, which should be essentially patched via our infrastructure as code processes. And that we prioritize vulnerabilities based on risk and business context. Like I said, really leveraging real-world threat intelligence, as well as operational intelligence that can come from those same threat intel sources about what we should expect when we apply a patch or leverage a specific version of software. Jeff, over to you to talk a little bit about how CrowdStrike can play in this area.
Yeah, certainly. So as part of the integrated platform approach, CrowdStrike has Falcon Exposure Management for vulnerability management, which is very broad and robust. So proactively addressing vulnerabilities in any organization is exhaustive and a never-ending process, right? There are hundreds of CVEs that can be published over the course of time, right, for any operating system or whatever. And we have the tools to check for OS vulnerabilities, also in the base software, in images, in the container image DevOps phase, along with checking packages. Right, packages are part of what happens when you develop a container image. They get embedded, right? You have to check for vulnerabilities with a particular code sets of the packages that get inserted with that. And also we have the ability in our vulnerability checks, especially when on the DevOps side for images, container images, looking for detections in the code, not detections like from a sensor, but we're detecting something amiss, like there's embedded secrets. And we can also now identify, we have filters to look for AI-related vulnerabilities in a package or in an image, right? So that's especially critical, right? Because what is the number one topic that most organizations are talking about is developing their AI services, and certainly a part of that is the foundational aspect of developing AI or images related to AI processes for that. So, and there could be vulnerabilities within that, which we can show within our Falcon Exposure Management. So one additional note, right, a little bit broader perspective is while this conversation has been around the multi-cloud environment, we should also consider the private clouds. Customers may have internet-facing workloads, services in private clouds, right? A big fat pipe coming into a shared data space in a large metropolitan area, maybe dual redundant home, so on and so forth. And so those are critical services, obviously probably operating with some under some workload environment, right? And our Falcon Exposure Management, that's the overall umbrella service, has a component called ESM, which is External Attack Surface Management. So what this does, it helps identify these workloads on the broad big I internet, right? Which may be out there, right? To identify for that, right? We can't go in the construct of like, I'm going to find them in AWS or Azure. They could be in a private cloud. Well, what's the commonality of the private cloud? You either find it via a common DNS scope name or an IP address scheme which may be using. So the visibility, right? First thing we opened with, visibility into all clouds environment, including private clouds, would be able to identify those workloads out there, identify perhaps critical vulnerabilities, and most importantly, getting the sensor on those workstations. Vulnerability management is much like the continuous phase of ensuring cloud assets are configured as securely as possible. For instance, with infrastructure as code scanning and IAM asset configuration checks. As part of the tool set we have for shift left, we have an independent tool set that developers can use for that. We have a variety of hooks into existing DevOps processes to assess the images that are being developed, Jenkins, for instance. But one of the key outcomes that CrowdStrike has is a service called expert.ai. And this is much better than the traditional CVE scores like CVSS because it uses AI and real-time threat intelligence to predict which vulnerabilities attackers will actually exploit, moving beyond the static security severity to dynamic risk, thereby preventing patch fatigue by focusing on and looking for the context-aware prioritization based on live adversary data, not just the theoretical impact, right? Because generally when a CVE first comes out, due diligence is done to assess the possible criticality, it's stamped, but it never changes. So once, be the expert AI and getting the telemetry in from a variety of data sources, we're dynamically learning to figure out what is indeed either it may be less critical, right, medium or high, or vice versa. So it's a much more realistic environment to be using that type of tool set, which is available within CrowdStrike. So it really is, the pervasive set. And once again, this is a key aspect of that platform approach is tool consolidation. Is you don't have to have a third-party set of tools to do this. It's integrated in the platform within the platform. Further, then can pivot off into other functional aspects, right? If you know that you've assessed an image and there's critical vulnerabilities, and you might have a Kubernetes environment, you can have policies within the Kubernetes admission controller to say, don't deploy a container with a specific vulnerability or any critical vulnerabilities for that. So we're tying in the image assessment policies with the Kubernetes admission control policies within that centralized platform and functionality. And once again, there'll be a video coming up which does a good job of explaining how you can find true CISO value and what can be done to assess the vulnerabilities and produce reports, tangible reports for resolution for that.
CrowdStrike, Falcon Exposure Management. Vulnerability Impact Translation. Security data is everywhere, but clarity is rare. Too much raw vulnerability data and not enough context. CVEs and severity scores are critical for analysts, but they don't resonate with business leaders. And when risk isn't clearly communicated, patches get delayed, risk builds up, and your organization stays exposed. Powered by AI, Falcon Exposure Management surfaces the most critical vulnerabilities, and Charlotte AI transforms them into clear business impact. Here's how it works. First, we create a workflow that pulls vulnerability data from Falcon Exposure Management and Falcon Next-Gen SIEM. Here, we collect key details like a CrowdStrike prioritization score delivered by Expert AI, which ranks vulnerabilities based on exploit status, adversary intel, vendor prevalence, and more. In addition to vulnerabilities found by the Falcon sensor, network scans and perimeter scans are ingested in Falcon Next-Gen SIEM, enabling the curation of high-fidelity context, which can be used in an automated workflow. When initiating this workflow, we will use Charlotte AI to generate a CISO-ready report within seconds. In our prompt, we will interpret relevant fields from the Next-Gen SIEM query and translate it into business context. For example, here we have explicitly interpreted what host info, criticality means. In exposure management, this field represents asset categories that reflect the business value of the system affected. In this report, all assets that are customer-facing, revenue-generating, or operationally critical will be included. When initiating this workflow, Charlotte AI will generate a CISO-ready report, including an executive summary comprised of recommended actions based on business impact and strategic resources for remediation. Once the workflow completes, Charlotte AI delivers an automated email, transforming raw vulnerability signals into a structured executive view that highlights the clearest paths forward to reduce risk. Visit our website to learn more about Falcon Exposure Management.
Derek, Jeff, I think that brings us to the end of the formal presentation. Let me just ask you this. What would you like our audience to know about the combined capabilities of Optiv and CrowdStrike?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd love to thank CrowdStrike for their continued partnership with Optiv. What I'd like people to know about Optiv is that we're here to help clients with all of their cloud needs, whether it's strategy, design, architecture, governance, upskilling their security teams around cloud, as well as implementation and build out of secure landing zones. We're here to help, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say we're here to help you manage CNAPP solutions like those offered by CrowdStrike, and we appreciate, again, their partnership.
Well said. Jeff?
Yes, well, CrowdStrike can't do it alone, and we rely on key partners like Optiv for not only to be a valued procurement partner, but a services and business technical relationship with the customers. Oftentimes, they have a much stronger relationship ongoing because they have contracts, negotiations, or support, whatever, with a variety of things, right? So customers like to have a valued, multifunctional partner for the services, maybe staff augmentation or whatever. And then Optiv does an excellent job of leading, presenting our particular solutions for that. In fact, considering an outcome from this whole discussion is if a customer is interested in learning more about our cloud security, we offer a cloud security health check. That's something that Optiv could initiate and complete and provide the results for. So you could get a quick snippet in regards to quick view in regards to what's the value proposition that number one, Optiv has, because they could provide that service for you, and then also get the tangible results from what would your environment look like with CrowdStrike CNAPP-enabled solutions to do a quick scan of your environment, various ways to deploy and implement it. But yeah, it's a very valued partnership between CrowdStrike and Optiv, and we look forward to growing that in the future.
Excellent. And quickly, where can our viewers go to learn more about what we've discussed here today?
Well, the simple and easy answer is www.optiv.com as well as www.crowdstrike.com.
Well said.
Excellent. Jeff, Derek, thank you so much for your time and insight today. Thank you for answering my questions. Grateful to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our attendees as well. We know you took time out of your day to be here today. We're grateful for that and trust you're walking away with some excellent new insight you can put immediately to work. As always, I look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming sessions. And until then, for Information Security Media Group, I'm Tom Field. Thank you so much for being a part of this discussion today.